All right, so here we go. We are talking about lesson 5.3, which is solving one-step equations using addition and subtraction. We are going back to having a little bit of flip lessons involved here and there so that you have a reference to go back to. If your parents are trying to help you out, whatever, there is a resource for you to reference. Today, we're doing that one-step equation, so they're simple equations. By the end of today, hopefully you'll be able to understand, explain, and solve equations using addition or subtraction. Now, again, I'm going to ask you to bear with me. I know that some of these equations you might be thinking, why do I need to do these steps? They're so easy, I can do it in my head. And this is just where we have to go back to what we talked about. You have to do easy ones when you know the answer so that you get the process down. That way, when things get hard, and they will get harder, you have those tools to use. You know how to solve the easy ones. The same tools will apply to the harder ones. So let's go get going. I'm going to encourage you to pause when I say pause and watch it all the way to the end because that's where your assignment will be. And with that, here we go. So what is an equation? We've talked last week about equations and translating equations. And we know that an equation is simply a math sentence with an equal sign in it. And so we talked about how an equation sounds like equal. And basically, when I think of equations, I'm going to have you draw this little very simplistic drawing over here. This is meant to be one of those weighted scales, and maybe you've seen them in science. But basically, they teeter-totter kind of back and forth. And whatever's on this side needs to weigh about the same as that side. Otherwise, it gets all, tilted one way or the other, depending on which way is heavier. So I am always going to be referring back to this scale, how we need to keep things even. And basically, that's just to remind us that both sides are equal. And basically what we're saying, this little, I don't know what it's called, fulcrum or whatever you have in the middle of your two sides, that's where your equal sign is. So whatever you have on the right side of the equal sign, it needs to be the same value as the left. And so basically, when we find a value for that variable, we need to make sure that it makes the equation true. And we talked last week about how that's the difference between a solution that makes your statement true and an answer is just something we say. And so we want to make sure that we are using solutions, things that make it true. So let's keep going. How do we go about solving an equation then? In short, the simple answer is using inverse operations. If you look up what inverse means, it means kind of the opposite, or they kind of undo each other. So that's essentially what we need to do here with our solving, is we need to undo what is happening in our equation. So for example, if we look at just this equation, y minus 5 equals 10. I'm going to start by thinking, what's happening to my variable? My variable is a y. What is happening to it? Y subtract 5 equals 10. So I can see that subtraction is happening. They are taking 5 away from my variable. So if I know that they are subtracting 5, then when I think about how do you undo subtraction, I need to add in order to solve it. So if I subtracted 5 to begin with, now I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And I forgot to mention, when we're solving equations to begin with, I want to see absolutely everybody drawing a line straight down from that equal sign. It helps us to remember that this is a balance like this, a scale, that whatever we do to one side, we have to do the same thing to the other. So you should always have this line that looks the same on both sides. When we do that, y minus 5 plus 5, our y remains, but we don't have anything left over here. 10 plus 5 is 15. So essentially, we don't need to have y plus 0. We're going to have y equals 15. That is our answer. Now, the beauty of equations, and now this was an easy one, you probably knew that, but we can always go back and check our answer. We can always go back and plug in our value for the y. So all I did was replace the y from my equation with what I said y equals. 15 minus 5, does that equal 10? Yes. So therefore, I found the solution. All right, let's keep going. Here are just some things that I want you to keep in mind when we solve equations. Some of it we've already covered, some of it I'm just trying to make blatantly clear. When we are solving an equation, we are always, no matter how small and easy or how big and complex our equation is, if we are trying to solve it, we are trying to do something called isolate the variable. Now think about the word isolate. If you're in isolation, that means you're all by yourself. There's not a lot around you. To isolate something, we want to get that variable all by itself. We want that variable, we want one of them, and we want it to be positive. So we want one variable, we want a positive variable. We do not want to leave it as a negative y or 2y. We want it to be a single positive variable. The next thing, we need to think whatever operation we perform to one side, we need to make sure to do to the other side in order to keep it balanced. And that's where I want to see you drawing that line straight under the equal sign as just a reminder to do the same thing to both sides of that equation. And then when you're trying to solve it, if you're stumped and you can't figure out what operation to do, you need to ask yourself, what is currently happening before I've done anything? What is currently happening to that variable? And once you can figure that out, then you need to ask yourself, well, how do I go about undoing that? How do I undo it? If you can do those three things, you'll be very successful in solving equations. Let's practice a couple of these on our own. So first of all, I'm going to draw my line straight down. Right now I have x minus 7 equals a negative 4. So what's happening to my variable? I don't even worry about what it equals. What's happening to my variable? I have x minus 7, so I'm subtracting 7. In order to undo subtraction, we need to add. So I'm going to add 7 to both sides. Now I'm going to draw my line to regroup things. I didn't do anything with my x, so that's going to come straight down. Negative 7 plus 7 equals 0. And then a negative 4 and a positive 7. These are different teams. Which one's bigger? The positive team. So my answer is going to be positive. So now I just subtract. 7 minus 4 is 3. So I end up with just plain x, because I don't need to leave it as x plus 0. X equals 3. When I plug it back in, 3 minus 7, does that give me a negative 4? Sure does. All right, now we've got our variable on the other side. Same difference. We're going to draw our line straight down. What's happening to my variable? I have y plus 10, so I'm adding 10 to my y. If I want to get that y by itself, I need to get rid of that 10, so I have to subtract 10 from both sides. So then I end up with y plus 0. 23 minus 10 gives me 13. So I end up with y equals 13 as my answer. I want you to go ahead and press pause and answer these bottom two, and then come back and check your thinking with mine to see if you got it right. All right, so again, hopefully you started out with that line. I am going to be a stickler looking for that. I have 16 added to z, so that means I'm going to subtract 16 from both sides. And when I do, 16 minus 16 leaves me with nothing, so my z is all by itself. 14 minus 16 gives me a negative 2. So z equals a negative 2. Over here, draw the line. Right now I have p minus 12. I'm subtracting 12. That means I need to add 12 to both sides in order to get p by itself. P minus 12 plus 12 leaves me with a simple single positive p. 12 plus 20, 32. I hope that's what you got for your answers. That's it. So now I want you to go ahead, look back at your homework or your notes. I want you to write a summary of how we solve simple one-step equations using addition and subtraction. And then you need to come to the front of the room and get the practice worksheet. Tomorrow we'll be getting more practice. Today is just a little bit. Have a great day. I'll see you later.